literature, so I thought I would start with his favorite poem. One dark morning, in the middle of the night, two dead boys got up to fight. Back to back, they faced each other, drew their swords, and shot each other. A deaf policeman heard the noise and came and shot them two dead boys. And if you don't believe that my lie is true, ask the blind man. He saw it too. This silly little rhyme somehow encompasses my dad's entire life story. See, my dad was a man of impossible contradictions, a kind of figure that you could only find in fiction. He was somehow both larger than truth, stranger than fiction, and his relationship with facts was sometimes a little gray. When I tell people stories about my father, people think that I've simply made him up, which makes sense because in a way, he feels made up. He feels like somebody wrote him somewhere. Keith Edward Sharples was born on February 18, 1958. He was raised in Buffalo, New York by his parents, Elsie, and was raised by Ronald Reeds. He had his siblings, Gerald Sharples, Larry Sharples, Cheryl Radigan, and Greg Reeds. He spent his summers working at Cradle Beach Camp, providing fun for disabled and disadvantaged youth. There he would meet lifelong friends like Donnie Tolbert. For most of my life, my father's stories of his past would typically begin around the age of 22. And it was honestly only in the last few months that I even saw a picture of what he looked like when he was younger. Dad didn't like talking about his life growing up, especially his teenage years. And of course, from the gap of information, there is some evidence. Scars along his body that tell a darker tale of survival. My dad once told my sister that with everything he went through, the one thing that got him through was humor, which might explain why my dad would often say the funniest things at the exact wrong time. I prefer to think that his life started in his 20s when he moved to Kansas City, which in a way his life truly did. He was working at Hanover Shoes when he met Paula Arillo at a Halloween party. The story was that she was there with someone else, and Dad was DJing. They connected, but Mom could not remember his name. And so she called his house with his roommates and said, "Is your name Roger? Is your name Elliot?" And finally, she got to his name, Keith. Fortunately, he remembered her name, and they were then devoted to each other for the next 42 years. They married and settled into the North End of Kansas City, bringing into the world 3 kids, Nicole, yours truly, and Philip. My father's love of blurring fact with fiction helped him in his career in sales. He was a born salesman. He could sell ice to an Eskimo. He was a buyer for Macy's, and he would work his way through luggage companies in New York before selling as an independent sales rep on the road. Growing up, our house always had closets full of luggage from various samples he bought for different things, and I really only realized how much luggage was a part of our life when last year I had to buy luggage for the first time, because anytime someone was going somewhere, he was like, "Oh, I've got some luggage for you. You should try this out." My dad could get anyone to do almost anything. For example, one time our family was all gathered together for a family meal, and we got a bunch of Happy Meals from McDonald's. Now, if you know anything about our family, we are notorious for being both particular and picky eaters. So every child had their own independent order, and of course, the people at McDonald's messed it all up. And everyone was upset because this one had ketchup and was supposed to have mustard, and this one had pickle and was supposed to have ketchup. And Dad said, "No problem, I'll get it handled." In 1993, he then went to the back bedroom, picked up the phone, and 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. And there was an employee from McDonald's who came to drop off completely remade meals to our home. My father successfully completed the first DoorDash of 1993. See, my stories like that encompass Dad's love of a good story. I like to think that my dad is only started. I take comfort that he's probably the feature or main character in the story of almost every single person here. My dad was the kind of person that if he made you remember him, even if you only met him once. Like there was the time he was detained by the Brazilian police because he was asked a question in Portuguese, and instead of saying that he didn't know the language, he just kept repeating "si" until eventually he was strip searched and had to be taken to the American consulate. Or the various escapades he encountered among my brother-in-law's fraternity brothers when he would visit my sister. Or the time that we went to an Applebee's when he was home from working in New York, and he told them, well, I'm from New York, and I expect a certain level of service. So he pulled out a stack of ones and put it on the table. And he told the waitress, this is your tip. When you do something right, I'll add to it. And when you do something wrong, I'll take it away. And my sister and I cringed in horror as when he came and didn't bring my mom her tea first, he took a bill away. And then when he came and brought my mom's food first, he added a bill to it. I know that somewhere all over the world, there's probably somebody telling a story in which my father is a featured character, even if they don't know his name. But Eulogy was also proud. He loved seeing people succeed. And we enjoy calling to brag on anyone who accomplished anything. I think part of that pride was also never wanting to admit or show when he was struggling. He hated showing when his body was too tired from the MS, or as he started to need more assistance. But one thing he was definitely proud of is that he was an amazing popo. He had a childlike love for his grandkids that was so pure and innocent, and whenever I would talk to him over the phone, he would tell me about the funny thing Connor said, or how smart Anthony was, or how Cameron would entertain an audience, or the cutest thing that Lily was doing that week. His spirit will live on in the many joys and accomplishments of his grandchildren as they go on to do all the things he hoped his family might ultimately achieve. Now, most of all, my dad was fun. Like, really fun. Like, if you were his child, you were embarrassed at how fun he was fun. He was the kind of person that could bring life to any event by his mere presence. And he could get you caught up in some kind of scheme with just his jolly demeanor. My favorite memories of him will always be from my siblings' weddings. Or really, anyway, when Dad would start dancing, and before you know it, the entire wedding would also dance too. He loved talking with anyone, and when he talked with you, he had this way of engaging in a person in seconds that made them feel like they were the only person in the world. His signature was his voicemails, which he would personally treat as if he were an 80s DJ or a shock jock, and every time he would call you, he would have a new character or an inappropriate cultural accent to try on. At first I'd get annoyed, but as time went on, I think I realized that Dad only ever wanted someone to play along. From my dad's life, we can learn how vital it is to give others the gift of a good time. My dad loved fiction. He loved being swept up in a new story, to be transported to somewhere else even for a minute, and he loved movies. Each time I'd call home, he'd ask me if I'd seen The Night Game, and maybe when I come to town, we could go to the show. And to be honest, I was really disappointed that the hardest breathing person didn't show up yesterday. So if the manager of the Blockbuster Video on 291 Highway is with you, just know I know how difficult today was for you, because my father was the first platinum member of Blockbuster Video in the entire state of Missouri. I think my dad's love of movies was a love to be transported to a different story than the one that he was from, or maybe the one that he was living, which was sometimes full of pain. When I was younger, I was frustrated with the fact that so many of Dad's stories seemed out of the realm of impossibility. I wanted to know which thing he told me was true and which was not. Which, when he would call court with his friends, I would get mad if the funny story he was telling had any basis in fact. And now that I'm older, I get what my dad and his life was trying to do. My dad's life legacy teaches us that life is hard. And sometimes, needs a little embellishment. If you live with chronic pain, if you struggle to survive difficult circumstances, if at times you've been given a terrible hand and you've made the best of it, maybe you need a good story. Because it softens the edges. So as we go from here, I invite you all to embellish. I hope you tell an inappropriate joke at the absolute wrong time, and tell a big story that fills people around your life. And in that way, the legacy of Keith Sharples will live on. After all, as my dad would say, if you don't believe that my lie is true, ask my father. He'll have heard it too.